Glastonbury! Welcome back to the Pilton Palais. Thank you so much for joining us. It is the anniversary of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I am absolutely delighted to be here to talk about it with the film's director, Edgar Wright, and music producer, Nigel Godrich!
Hello, hello.
So this is obviously a film that is where music is very important. It's always important in your films, but particularly so here. So given that Nigel's here, should we start talking about where did you start with the music of Scott Pilgrim? How did that come together?
Well, because the Brian Lee O'Malley's books, you know, it's Scott Pilgrim is in a band, and you know, there are scenes with the battle of the bands, and there are other artists, and you know, getting fictional bands right is quite tricky. Some films get it perfect, like obviously Spinal Tap is a great example. Sometimes, I also really like Phantom of the Paradise, is one of my favorite films, and that has a lot of fictional artists in it. And it was actually, I talked to Nigel about it very early on, and it was your idea, rather than have one artist do everything, to have different artists do the different bands. That was your idea.
I don't know if you remember that.
I can tell you my memory of all of this is that meeting Edgar, we were going out for a drink or something, and he was saying, you know, I'm doing this film and there's all this music in it, and I need to somehow like tie in all the score with all these different bands, and like I don't know what to do. Who should I get to help me with this? And I was like, me. But one thing I should say also about Edgar is that he has the most encyclopedic knowledge of music of anybody that I've ever met. I mean, way more than me. I'm very narrow-minded, as I just previously disclosed. But for him, he knows about everything, and he's just, he had such specific direction for the things, the interpretations of the comic. And then also we had all the real bands as reference points, so we could approach them, you know, which was a real luxury because they were so open to it. You know, Toronto is such an amazing music scene. And then beyond that, it was just about like coming up with some really good ideas to make Sex Bomb. Obviously, I was like, well, I'll ask Beck. And he is an amazingly open-minded visionary who sort of understood. And, you know, it was like a magic thing. Over the course of 2 years it took, didn't it, really? It was a long time.
What's crazy about Beck did all the music for Sex Bomb, and it was Nigel's idea to ask Beck. I mean, I'm a big Beck fan, but I didn't think of that. And then Beck essentially recorded all of Sex Bomb's songs in a day.
Oh my God.
And I remember we left him to it. He had a studio at home. We gave him all the storyboards, all of the artwork, and what scenes we wanted. And then we left him to it. And then I remember Nigel said, at the end of the weekend, said, I have a CD, it has 32 tracks on it.
Oh my God.
That is what Beck had done that weekend. Now, the music that's in the opening sequence, which is called We Are Sex Bomb, there was only one take of it, and it was basically the demo. So what you hear in the opening credits is Beck's demo, and Nigel, you were the person, when we were talking about, oh, do we do a better version of this? And you said, I don't think there's any reason for it to be any better than this. This is raw and it feels real. It feels like somebody's doing it in their garage. Why not just use this? So it's kind of crazy that song, which has something like 30 million streams on Spotify, is like a one-take demo. It blows my mind. And then the crazy thing is the actors had to learn that demo, which, especially Alison Pill on drums, the drums are wildly changing all the way through it, right? And you were there to help them, like a music camp.
Yeah. I mean, basically we had the big storyboards, and Brian LeBarton, who is playing drums on that track and all those tracks. And, you know, I think for Beck, it's one of those things where when he has an opportunity to not have to present himself first, his ability is so magnificent that he can hide behind this thing and just do what he does. You know, it's just very, very easy for him to like make garage music. You know, he doesn't have to, there's no agenda, doesn't have to prove anything or like refine its direction. It was just really basic, pure. It was perfect. It was a great vehicle for him. It was perfect, I thought. Yeah, there you go.
Also some other things about tracks. Black Sheep by Metric, which is another big song in the film. We went to Toronto to meet a bunch of Toronto artists, specifically Metric and Broken Social Scene. And Metric was Brian Lee O'Malley had based the character of Envy Adams partly, not entirely, but partly on Emily Haynes. So we went to them and said, hey, you know, do you have a song for us? And Black Sheep, which has now sort of become their biggest song, was a song that they'd left off the album Fantasies. She says, well, we have this song called Black Sheep. We left it off the album because it sounded like Metric doing Metric. And I was like, we'll have that one. And it works perfectly in the movie, and Brie Larson sings the vocal. So it's Brie Larson singing with Metric, and then Broken Social Scene did the music for Crash and the Boys, and Kevin Drew from Broken Social Scene, they were in the studio trying to come up with it. And the actor, Eric Knudsen, who plays Crash, Kevin Drew was getting all method, and he called me and he says, we can't do this song without knowing what the actor looks like. Can we get the actor in the studio? Eric Knudsen was like 20 years old, and I called him and I said, so they wanted him to come in and do it with them. And I said to Eric Knudsen, I called him and said, hey, do you know the band Broken Social Scene? He goes, only my favorite band of all time. I said, we'll get this. Said, how do you want to go and record with them tomorrow? And he was like, seriously? He goes, yeah, seriously. Yeah. So then he went in, they did all of the stuff together, and then Kevin's calling me saying, we love Eric. Eric is an honorary member of Broken Social Scene. So it was all like stuff like that all the way through the movie. It was so sweet.
Can I ask, just when you mention your cast, and I am going to open it to the audience, so I hope you've all got your questions ready. Did you see all of your cast's futures coming? Like, did you expect quite so many Oscars and Emmys and nominations for this, that, and the other among that group of people?
Well, not obviously, I couldn't predict everybody's careers, but you can definitely see when people are like superstars, you know. And obviously somebody like Kieran Culkin, I'd already seen him and stuff, but at that point he was somebody that, by his own choice, not working as much as maybe he could, he's very sort of selective. So actually, it's funny, I ran into Jesse backstage, and I actually hadn't seen Jesse Armstrong since Succession was on. I haven't seen it for a few years. And I said, it's funny, like when that show came out, is it finally Kieran Culkin has the vehicle where everybody realizes he's a superstar. Obviously in this movie, like, Kieran's amazing, but everybody in it, like Aubrey Plaza's first movie, Brie Larson was like 19. I remember seeing Brie Larson's screen test, and we're like, she's a superstar. We have to cast her. She came in at the end of a day of auditions where there were lots of other people more established than her. And after her audition, you couldn't even remember who else had come in that day. So there's lots of those things. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to say these are future Emmy, Tony, Oscar winners, but it was an incredibly stacked cast. I mean, I think when you watch the opening credits and you go, oh wow, everybody's in this movie. So it was amazing. And very sort of when we've all stayed friends as well, which is really nice.
That's really good. And has the cartoon version of the comic brought more people back to the movie in recent years?
I don't know. That's a good question. It was great fun. I mean, the anime was mainly like Brian Lee O'Malley doing that. I was a producer on it, but my main job as a producer was to bring the cast back, which everybody was very willing to do, and everybody came back, which is, you know, and it's not like they're getting their movie star rates doing like an anime show. They did it for scale. But they all did it because they loved the project, so it was really nice having everybody back, you know.
Awesome. All right, do I have any questions in the audience? I have a lovely assistant, Graham, who's going to come probably to the nearest people with the microphone. Okay, here we go.
Hello. Firstly, as a Gloucester boy, I need to thank you for Hot Fuzz, about 30% of my personality now. I want to ask, how do you navigate the relationship with your cinematographers, and how much of the visual creative process do you share? Or is it a one-man band?
Well, the cinematographer on Scott Pilgrim was Bill Pope, who I've worked with a couple of times since, and everything about this movie is, if you think that Bill Pope was the cinematographer for The Matrix, but also Clueless, somewhere between those two films is Scott Pilgrim. So Bill Pope is the perfect person to shoot this movie. Actually getting him on board on this movie, because it was a very ambitious script, and I think there were some things that the studio didn't quite understand what it would look like. And so, almost as a strategic thing, not just because I wanted to work with him, getting like Bill Pope on board as cinematographer, then they go, oh wow, they've got the Matrix guy doing it. It helps because then people can start to understand where it might be going. But working with him was amazing. I love, you know, everything is a team effort on a movie, but obviously there's some very ambitious sequences in these films, and having somebody as experienced as Bill doing it made it a little bit easier.
All right, another question.
Hi, Edgar, how you doing? What struggles you face as a young filmmaker, and how did you overcome them?
I think when you, always the thing, this isn't just as a young filmmaker, it's making any film. The biggest struggle of getting any film made is getting the people who are going to pay for it to understand what it is, you know, and that is really tough sometimes. And this film particularly was like a very ambitious thing to people to get their heads around, even though it was actually a project that Universal had brought to me. For them to be able to visualize exactly what it is, it's a difficult thing to do. So part of your job as a director to get a film over the finish line is getting everybody to understand what it is. And that isn't always an easy task. So I think that's always the biggest struggle. Even as far back as Shaun of the Dead is getting people to understand what exactly it is that you want to make. And then some people just can read the script and see it, and some people can read the script and just not see it. The exact same script that you know from the film, they'll read it and they'll say, I don't get it. I don't see what this is. So but that's a struggle that you always go through. It's just like the sort of the having to kind of sell people on what exactly it is the toughest thing.
Hi. Well, first of all, I just want to say you are such like a huge inspiration to me. I'm starting uni for filmmaking in September, and you were one of the first directors that really sort of like inspired that for me.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to say that. And my question is, what advice would you give to someone that wants to like break into the film scene?
I think the tricky thing is that you've got to find a way to just make something. And when I say that, it's like, you don't have to be, I'm not from a rich background. I like sort of kind of just made films with my friends at comprehensive school, but like super, super low budget. The difficult thing is like to get people to understand what you want to make, you somehow have to find a way to make something just to sell yourself. Like I was saying, it's similar to his question. On script alone, it's really tough. You have to kind of have something where, whether it's a short or anything where people can understand what you're like as a director, because they won't understand it with just like a piece of paper. So that's difficult, because I feel like, you know, struggles that I've had is you're just trying to sort of get people to understand what your style is and how you want to make something. And that's difficult to do verbally or just written down. You have to kind of just by hook or by crook, with no money, just like make something that sells who you are and what you want to do. So that's be my advice.
Nigel, is this why you stay away from film for the most part? Just for the sheer difficulty
I
of
mean,
getting
yeah,
it
I would
to
sort of
happen?
agree. I don't really do a lot of film work because I don't want to. You know, I mean, it's the sort of, I live in a room full of mirrors, you know, I just kind of get to do what I want. And doing film score stuff is a lot, you are right at the bottom of the rung, really. But the reason I was eager to do this, first and foremost, because I just wanted to work with my friend and I know what he's capable of and I could see what it could be, you know. And secondly, because I have that agenda, the same as you, and you were referring to this before, about how music never looks real in films, and it's a real bugbear, you know. It's like, go and watch Walk the Line, it's like, oh my God. Sorry, but you know, the reference, the Spinal Tap reference is a really good one, because amongst those in the know, that is the kind of apex of achieving that. You know, it's like they're really playing, and like what, you know, obviously it's an amazing movie, but it translates so well, and it really contributes to the thing working. You know, it would be the joke would be over if they were like miming. You know, it just wouldn't work. So I was very eager to do that. I knew that I was in safe hands with Edgar because we have our relationship. You know, so I essentially, you know, I don't enjoy. I've done work for films, and lots of music that I've made has been in films. But to do a score is another whole thing. That was the other side of the movie as well. Having done all the band work and everything, then there was the score as well, which kind of augments everything. Which again relates back to Edgar's encyclopedic knowledge of music, because everything had a kind of tone So it was it was really fun because we worked together. And so I would always, I'll work with this guy anytime, but
not
not full time, exactly, yeah.
Sorry, we had a question over here. Hi.
Hi Edgar, massive fan of you. I grew up in Wales, Somerset as well. I see Leslie a lot in my work, give her drinks, spoke to Oscar. Went to Wales Blue School, so, exact same. But I was speaking to Oscar and he said filming The Running Man has been such a struggle out in Bulgaria. But I want to know, is because you're a massive Sparks fan, will the #1 song in heaven be in The Running Man with Glenn Powell running?
No, it won't. I mean, I've never actually used a Sparks song in one of my films, but I felt like I had to make up for it by making a documentary that had all the Sparks songs in it. So I feel like I've professed my love for Sparks enough now, right? Surely, but I love them. I mean, and no, you know what? Weirdly enough, there was nearly a Sparks song in Hot Fuzz. I nearly used This Town Ain't Big Enough for both of us in Hot Fuzz, and the only reason I didn't is, and every time I'd watch the scene with that song in it, I'd start really like listening to the song and not watching the scene, and I was like, this song is like too good to be in this scene. I'm distracted. It's not going to happen. So like I said, I made up for it by making an entire Sparks documentary, which I think has the record for the most songs by a band in their documentary. It's sort of like 100 Sparks songs in it.
And we have one final question over here. Hi.
Hello. I just had a question about your editing, because it's so funny and the rhythm is so funny. Especially like the shoelaces moment where he's getting ready. And I just wanted to know, when you storyboard, do you have that rhythm like in your head beforehand, or do you discover it in the editing, or does it come from the music and then you cut it into the music? I was wondering how you did it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the shoelaces moment because I'll come back to that, but I actually, work with really great editors, and actually all of the editors that I've worked with, the main two, like Chris Dickens and Paul Matchless, all worked on Spaced with me. And Chris Dickens did Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and Paul Matchless, who edited Spaced with me as well, this was his first movie as an editor. Paul Matchless and John Amos, it was their first feature credit, and they both got nominated for the ACE, which is amazing. It's all like storyboarded, so a lot of that is there in the script and in the storyboards. But ironically enough, the sequence that you were talking about, for whatever reason, didn't have storyboards, and maybe it was a late addition. But on the day that we were shooting, to show to Bill Pope, I drew on a piece of paper the shots, like the zip of his parka, his sweatband going on, and I drew really roughly the shot of like shoelaces. And I still have that piece of paper. I took a photo of it on the day because. And it's funny, when we had one of the premieres, I remember in London, the film went down really well, but like the biggest laugh of the entire movie was him tying his shoelaces. And I was like, wow, it's crazy that you spent all these millions of dollars on all these other sequences. And then the biggest laugh is a shot of somebody tying their shoelaces up. I will say as well, it is actually Michael Cera doing the shot as well. The other key thing is, if you have inserts, if you can get the actor to do it, it's always going to be better, instead of somebody else doing the hands. So that's yeah, anyway, so it's funny you mentioned that because I did storyboard it, but I storyboarded it like 15 minutes before we shot it.
I'm afraid that is all the time we have pretty much for questions. I want to put something to you that I've thought for a long time, and this film is one of my examples of it, that you can make a truly great video game movie as long as it's not based on a video game. Am I wrong? Is this true?
I'm not as much of a video games head as everybody thinks they are, but when I watch some other video game movies, I feel the same thing that a lot of people feel. Is like, wouldn't it be more fun playing the game? It's difficult, right? It's difficult to kind of make you invested in something which you're not. It's like watching a video games adaptation for the most part is like watching my brother play the PlayStation over his shoulder. It's intermittently entertaining, but it's more fun for him. So this was nice to use all of that iconography of video games, but it's not an adaptation of a game, yeah.
And I believe we have to let you go so you can finish working on The Running Man.
I will say one thing about The Running Man.
Yeah.
Michael Cera is in it, and he's fantastic in the movie. So The Running Man actually is my reunion with Michael Cera after 15 years.
Had he changed much?
Yeah, I mean, he's like a father of two. When I worked with Michael on this film, he turned 21 on set, and to work with him again is like a man and a father of two was like, he's amazing. I mean, Michael is incredible, and I loved working with him in this, and I loved working with him again this year.
All right, so we'll see you back here next summer for The Running Man.
With
maybe.
Michael, hopefully. Well, get Michael along.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. Thank you so much for your questions. And ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
thank you
Enjoy
to
the
Nigel
movie.
and Edgar.
Nigel Godrich. Thank you.